So now that we've finished number 18, we are moving on to number 19. And we're going to be using piece 9 for that. So we're just going to fold over piece 9 and do a basting. So I've already done that on this one. It's pinned, and then I've also done the basting stitch. So what you'll do for that is take your piece 9, and this is going to be one of the pieces, the few pieces where you're going to be putting wrong sides together. So go ahead and just fold it over at the sides, wrong sides together. And then pin that down. Do the same thing at the other end. And then match up the middle. And then just pin along the edges. Okay, and then once you have enough pins in that you feel comfortable doing your basting stitch, you can do that with me. Now they actually tell you in the instructions to do a basting stitch and then do an ease stitch after that so that you can gather it. I'm just going to use my basting stitch to do my gathering. That's up to you what you want to do and how you prefer to do it. Lots and lots of pins in my squirrely fabric. Okay, this is good now, so I will go baste it and you can watch me do that. Okay, I'll set my stitch for a long stitch so that I can gather this later. And I'll just start here where I actually have fabric that lines up with the 5/8 here. And I'm just going to pull the threads through to make sure I have enough to pull on later, and then baste right over my pins. Okay, so you should do that to both pieces. Make sure you keep the threads long, take out all the pins, give them a good pressing, and then set them both aside. Moving on to step 20, we're just now going to take those little sleeve heads that we just ease stitched, and we're going to be putting those into the armhole. So I'll show you the one that I've already done. Here's the finished one, so it's just going inside like this. And it's just going to help give that sleeve a little bit of a pop up here. So I'll grab my other one now. Then take your sleeve head and you're going to take your dots that you made, which are essentially just right here where you would have started your basting stitch, and you're going to put them, match them up with your other dots inside of your armhole edge here. So mine is right here. And then match up the other one as well. So there's another one here. And that one gets matched up right here, matched up with the other dot. Okay. And then you basically have to get this all to fit into the sleeve. So this was easier for me to pop it out like this once I had the insides pinned. And then you're just going to pull on that ease stitch. Okay. I'm just going to do a little bit here and then wrap that around my needle, or sorry, not my needle, my pin. Wrap that around the pin and then do the same thing on the other side. Hold on, I've got both here and I just need one. Okay. Pull that. Okay, needs to be pulled a little bit more. Still needs to be pulled a little bit more. Okay, that feels pretty good. Okay, a little bit more. Okay, I think that's going to be good. So let me just wrap that off there. Wrap the thread around my pin. And then you're going to adjust the gathers so that they're just evenly distributed. Okay, that's pretty good. Alright, so once you've got this set, you'll just pin all of this in, and I'm going to do something that I normally would not tell someone to do, and I'm going to pin this way, which is not the ideal way of pinning, but it's getting very difficult for me to pin the way that you're supposed to, simply because this fabric is so thick here now. So if you can and you're able to, definitely pin like this, the normal way. I just can't do that anymore with this particular piece. So I'm going like this. So join me at the sewing machine once you have that done. Now once again with this little sleeve cap, they do tell you that you should base this and then stitch it. I've already stitched one and I feel pretty comfortable with just going ahead and stitching this permanently, so that's what I'm going to do. But if you haven't done a lot of sleeves before and this is new to you, then definitely baste it instead of doing a permanent stitch, but I'm going to use a permanent stitch. So stitch right over that. Then do a back stitch. I'm going to do mine twice just because it's so thick once again. And keep filling underneath, especially if your piece has gotten as thick as mine, because this will start to turn. So you want to make sure that none of that turns. And then finish with a back stitch. Okay, the next thing you'll want to do is take a look at that. So look on the inside and make sure everything looks okay there. Remember, it's not going to show, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but you just want to make sure there's nothing totally crazy in there. And then you'll also want to flip out the right side of your fabric and take a look at your top sleeve here. Okay, this looks all right. And then I would suggest also checking your sleeve underneath just to be absolutely certain. And you'll want to check that sleeve all the way around. Even underneath. Okay. All right, this is okay. We're good. So the next thing that you'll need to do is actually go in here, and we're going to do a second stitch just to strengthen the armhole before we trim it. So I would recommend starting at some place that you'll remember. So for me, I'm going to start at the bottom of the sleeve right here, just so that I know whenever I'm coming back around that that is what I'm stitching. And you're going to stitch 1/4 inside of the permanent stitching you've already done. So that's just a little bit over to the right of the 5/8 that you already did. Okay, make sure that you are using a permanent stitch, and then just stitch a little, back stitch, and then continue throughout your entire sleeve, filling underneath here constantly to make sure that you don't grab anything you're not supposed to. Hi, Corgi. Okay, so we're approaching the bottom of the sleeve here, and I know that that was my starting point. So I'm there, you can see my new stitching. I'm just going to maybe go a little bit extra through that seam there just to strengthen that. Okay, and then I'll match up with my previous stitching here. And you'll need to do that on both sleeves. And just check every time you sew anything on a sleeve, you want to double check that you haven't messed anything up. Because they really are hard to do. Alright, so this one looks fine. So now I'm going to do that on the other sleeve. You'll need to do that too. And then I'll show you how I trim this out with the next step. Okay, so this is still a part of that same step, and we're just going to trim this out. Once again, just as another additional reminder, double check this on the outside on all of those layers before you cut this out. Just make sure that you haven't grabbed anything that you were not supposed to. And I recommend when you're trimming this out that you hold all of the layers and use your fingers to press the other side out, just so that you can make sure you're not cutting anything that you're not supposed to be. So now we're just going to trim very close to that second stitching. Oof, this is going to be interesting. Mine is so thick I'm actually going to have to use the end of my scissors down here, I think, to get through it. So I have to do this very carefully. There we go. Okay. So also, just as a reminder, this is your 5/8 inch stitch. This is the additional stitch that you did close to that, and you are cutting off very close to that second stitching. And then once you finish that, you'll also want to go through and clip any extra threads that are out that don't need to be there. For example, this, anything like this, these can be cut. You'll want to get rid of those just so that it's nicer on the inside. Be very careful. I'm not going to film the rest of this because I need to be very careful myself when doing this, but you get the idea. So cut this out, do that on both of your arm sleeve holes, and then join me again and we'll do the next step. So this is about how much I trimmed out of my sleeves. As you can see, there's quite a bit there, and I'll probably still be finding a few loose threads as I continue this project. And this is what the bodice looks like so far with both of the sleeves. Okay. Now moving on to the next step that we have in our pattern here, we have step 21, which says to turn in the seam allowance on the lower edge of the lining and press it. That is for when we're ready to attach the skirt. We'll basically be sewing this on the outside, and then the reason the lining gets pressed is because you use that pressing as a guide of where to do your hand stitching over the skirt. And that will make more sense when we get there if it doesn't make sense to you now. I'm not going to do that part yet because I have quite a few fitting things that I need to do. If you remember, my sleeve is basted from maybe 2 inches from the top of the arm and down, so I have to work on that. And then the sides of my bodice here with the right side of the fabric and also the lining have quite a bit of basting in them as well. So I need to do some fitting things before I worry about all of that stuff. But once we have finished that, we'll be moving to step 22, where we have to go back to dress A, and then we will be completing paragraphs 20 through 34. So that is what I will be covering next. So for the dress A instructions, I won't be doing number 20. You can do that if you want. It's just reinforcing the bottom of your skirt if you want to do that. I am moving to step 21 and 22. And I'm going to cover both of those steps together at the same time because they're both covering how to do your darts for your skirt. So I have my pieces laid out here. You have a piece 4 skirt, and then you also have a pattern piece 5. And you'll see on mine, for my piece 5, I have 2 right side of the fabric pieces that I've already done the darts on, and then I also have 2 lining pieces that I still need to do the darts for. So I'll show you how to do the darts on that. And then I have the same thing for piece 4. So piece 4 is your dress front, so the front of the skirt, and that should have been cut on the fold of the fabric. So when it opens out, it's wide like this, and it will have a dart here and a dart here. And I've already done one of those. This is my lining pattern piece 4, and I've already done the darts. So what you're going to do on all of these skirt pieces is find your dart and mark all of these dots, and then you're going to put them together just like we did for previous pieces that had darts so that they form like this. So go ahead and pin these together the same as we did previous ones, and then I'll show you how I stitch them at the machine again. So here's what those pieces look like before I stitched them. I just thought I'd show you how I had them pinned in case anybody needed more instruction on the darts. This is what they look like. That is my piece 4. And then on my piece 5, once again I already did 2 of them. And then these are the lining pieces that aren't in the pattern, but I'm adding them. So these are all pinned. Now I'm going to take them to the sewing machine and stitch them. So I'll do 2 more dart examples here, although you've seen this a few times now, so it should be easy for you now. You're doing just a regular stitch, and you'll just go through that first dot. And also you could outline these too if you need to. For the lining, I don't usually stress over that quite so much. Then I've reached my second point there. And then my third point is here at this pin. I'm actually going to take that out and just leave it in like this so I know where it is. And then I'll back stitch when I get to that point. And then once I take that out, I'm going to just do a small knot here. Not pulling too tightly, just loose. And then one more, just to close that off. Okay, that looks good. So I'll set that aside. And then I have one more to do. I already did my piece 4 front darts. I'll show you those in a minute. They're done just the exact same way that you see me doing this. And these are my back skirt pieces, my piece 5s. Back stitch. See your second point, that's where you're going. Take my pin out. And then back stitch. And I'll tie that off too. Okay, so now that this is done, let me show you what all of those look like now that they're finished. Okay, so here is my piece 4, and I have one of those with the right side of the fabric, 2 darts done there, and then also my lining with 2 darts done there. And here is my piece 5, and as you can see I have 2 of those with the right side of the fabric and also 2 of the lining pieces, and all of them have darts. For your piece 5s, you'll need to press both of the darts towards the back like this. So the side that has this at the bottom, that is the way that you need to press. So press this one in like this, press this one in like this. For piece 4, you need to press your darts toward the front like this. Okay, so I just finished pressing all of my darts, and now I am moving on to step 23 and 24. Now, I don't need to do step 23 because I'm actually adding a lining, so this seam is not going to be exposed. But if you do need to do that, you can just use a zigzag stitch, which you should be able to find on most basic sewing machines. And you'll just stitch a little bit there, back stitch, stitch all the way down, and then do another back stitch, and you'll do that on both pieces. So if you need to do that, go ahead and do that. I am skipping that and moving on to 24. And step 24 just has you put the skirt back sections together, and you'll see here that you're supposed to do it between your 2 dots. So let's do that now. So this is your skirt back. It's piece 5. So I have 4 of these because I'm adding a lining. You'll either have 4 if you're also adding a lining, or you'll just have 2 of your nice fabric. And then these are my pressed pieces. So I'll just be taking the right side here and then matching up the right side with the other piece, like so. And then I'm going to pin those together, matching up my notches and my dots. So right sides together, matching my notch. And then I can see that I have 1 dot here. There we go. And then the other dot is up here. So because I'm using an invisible zipper, instead of starting my stitching here at the dot, I'm actually going to start here at the notch. And that's because I will need this space to finish up my zipper later. I don't like to have a short zipper, which is what will happen if I don't lower that seam a little bit before I get to that part. And that will make more sense whenever you see me do it. So for now, I'm just going to put my pins in here, matching up my edges. All right, and then I will take this to the machine and stitch it. And I'm going to do this for my lining and also for the right sides of my nicer fabric as well. So let's do the lining now, and you can see how I do that. All right, so I'm ready to stitch my skirt together. I'm just using a regular stitch, starting at 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so stitch that down, do a little back stitch, and then just continue on down at 5/8. it, and then as you get to your dot down here, you'll see that you're no longer keeping this at 5/8, just stitch straight down to the dot and ignore that. Okay, so it doesn't need to be at 5/8 once you get here, obviously. So there's my dot. Now I'm going to back stitch there. Okay, and then take that out. Do that for your right side of your fabric. If you're adding the lining like I'm adding, also do it for the lining, just like we just did. Take both of those seams on those pieces and go to your ironing board and just press that open. So just press that nice and flat, and then we'll continue on to the next step. So this is my finished piece 5. Here's my lining, stitched together and pressed open. And then here is the nice right side of my fabric. Well, it's the wrong side of the right side of my fabric, and it's also pressed open. So now we're ready for the next step. Moving on to step 25, now we're just going to be stitching the skirt back and the skirt front together. And of course this is going to be right sides together. So this is the right side of my lining skirt back that I've sewn together. And then I'm just going to grab my skirt piece 4, which is the front, and put that right sides together. Okay, so this is the top of the skirt and this is the bottom of the skirt. And I'm going to start by matching up my edges as I usually do. Like so. And then I'll match up the edges of the bottom here. And then I'll also match up my notch. Okay, now all the rest of this just needs to be pinned. So I'm just going to do one of these as an example. Okay, so all of this needs to be pinned from the top of the skirt to the bottom of the skirt, and then you have to do that exact same thing for the other side as well. So this is the other side, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. So go ahead and finish pinning both of your sides, and then you can stitch yours along with me. Alright, so I already stitched up the other side of my skirt here, and now I'm going to do this side so you can see it. So I'm starting from the top here at a regular 5/8 inch stitch. Just going to stitch that a little, do my back stitch, and then continue. Now something I'm going to do a little bit differently that you don't have to do and is not in the instructions. When I get to my notch here, I'm going to be moving to a slightly smaller seam, and that's just because I know that for my own personal fit, I need to do that with this pattern company. So as I get towards that notch, I'm going to just move in slightly to my next marking here on my sewing machine, because I need that extra little bit of wiggle room. And then I'll finish my entire seam using this new stitching line. And I did that on the other side as well. And I also did it with my other skirt piece. So this is the lining I'm working on now. I'm doing that for my lining pieces and also the right side of my fabric. Alright, and as you end here, do a little back stitch. And then all of those seams will need to be pressed open. So you'll want to go to your ironing board now and press both sides open. And if you created a lining piece for your skirt like I have done, then press those open as well. So here are both of my skirt pieces. The lining is here, and then I also have the nicer right side of my fabric here. Before I can proceed to step 26, which will be attaching this to the bodice, I need to do some fitting things. So the first thing that I've done, if you want to do your fitting similar to how I'm doing it, is I did a basting stitch here at the back just to hold my lining and the right side of my fabric together while I do the fitting, and I did that at exactly 5/8 of an inch. So the next thing that I'll do is I'll put on the undergarments that I want to wear with this dress, and then I will pin these together matching both of those 5/8 inch seams so that I know where the zipper will fit, and then I will start adjusting as I need to the rest of these places that I've basted. So my sides are partially basted, and my sleeve is also partially basted. So do that next if you want to fit yours the way that I'm doing it. Okay, so because I'm at home in Kentucky, I'm a little limited in my resources, so please ignore this and my lovely sunburn. Here is the top of my dress so far, and I just pinned it with the basting that I put in the back. So this is actually fitting pretty well so far. The only changes that I made, I had a strange pucker on the side here, so I have that pinned, and I'll be taking a look at that on the inside. And then there are a few places in the back that I had to bring the pins a little bit in and then a little bit out as well. So what I will do now is take my marker or chalk, and I'm going to just hold this and then just trace like this on both sides so that I can match up my seams the way that this needs to be altered for me.